All right, well, as we continue to link up with Frederick, just to give my guests this opportunity to give their closing remarks. Michael, you were on an issue when we were talking about issues pertaining to the voice of the church. Take it on.
The voice of the church, as I was talking about, I've heard that the church is being built in State House, and I think it is already in the budget.
Yeah.
And we've already also seen the beautiful architectural drawing. And as I was saying, that, in this country now we're in a place where we were not before the 2010 Constitution. There's a lot of information that is out there. We can now read budgets. We can now understand what budget says. We can now know the plan of government. And I can tell you for free, Alan, this is the government that you can literally get anything from it. I'm not saying that people are careless in this government, but we seem to be getting information from the government that ordinarily you'll not get in government, because people, either because of the technology or because this are being done by people like us, but there's a lot of information that is flowing out there. Even before an implementation, before it is even done, we already have that information. I have no problem with the church being built in State House, because the president is a Christian. I believe there will be one president, maybe a Muslim one day. He might want to put a mosque there. There's no problem. We have enough land there. The question that we need to ask ourselves is, when we as a country start having a discussion, why is there a change of mind? Why is the president coming out and saying, look, why are you fighting the church that is being built in State House? Then I'll build it with my own money. I don't think the president needs to build with his own money in State House if he wants to build a church. If it's already budgeted for, these are the state property.
But we've seen him to do these things.
I am seeing... I'm seeing a church and a mosque and these other things being built, at the headquarters of KDF right here in the city. I don't think there's a problem if the president says, I want to build a church. But he can do that. The only thing that he cannot tell us that I want to do it with my own money. Because if he does it with his own money in a property that is property of the government, then what happens when he leaves?
Is why now a valid question?
So, pardon?
Is why now a valid question?
I think the why now is the most fundamental question, and that is what the Gen Z are asking. Why are you apportioning money in places that, there seems to be no need for it to be there, because whatever you have there, you can still use it to worship. And again, the church, as a community is saying, you've been worshiping everywhere, and honestly, you have no shot.
But he says he doesn't care what the devil says or what the devil like. So people are asking, who is this devil?
This is not a question of the devil, and sometimes you can draw in some few statements that really doesn't find itself there. This is not a question of the devil. The president is allowed to build a church, and if it's a state property, we'll leave it there. And people could use it for generation to generation. The only thing is, 1 minute you see, that it's supposed to accommodate about 8,000 people, and 1 minute the president says it's supposed to accommodate only 300 people. Really, this information needs to be unequivocal. But I want to conclude by saying this. As you block people on those roads, know that there are people that have appointment for the doctors today. Know that people are going to the airport to other countries. Please listen to the plight of these people you're blocking. If he says I'm going to the airport, allow them to do that.
All right, Michael. Let me get my colleague Frederick Kai, who's been giving us updates in Mombasa, to bring us up to speed with what is happening. Kai?
Thank you so much. We are coming live here from Mombasa County. Na kama utaweza kuniruhusu niweze kubadili lugha tu niweze kuongea Kiswahili, ni kwamba tayari zoezi la kuweza kushika doria kwa polisi limeweza kuanza. Tumeweza kuwa katika maeneo yale ya Central Police, na nyuma yangu kama mpigaji picha ataweza kuonyesha kwamba ni polisi ambao tayari kwa sasa wameweza kuanza kushika doria kuweza kuingia katikati wa jiji la Mombasa, kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba mji wa Mombasa basi ama jiji la Mombasa liko shwari. Pale awali tumeweza kuangazia maeneo ya katikati ya mji wa Mombasa. Maduka machache yalikuwa tayari yashaweza kuanza kufunguliwa na mengi yakaweza kuekelewa placard ama reinforcements, pengine wakiweza kujiweka tayari kwa kwamba lolote linaweza kutokea kutokamana basi pengine na mawe na vile vile pia kutokamana na ile ati ya kwamba maandamano yanaweza kufanyika katika maeneo haya ya kaunti ya Mombasa. Itakumbuka kwamba barabara ya kuelekea eneo la State House tayari wameweza kuweka kizuizi pale na kuweza kuangalia tu ni kina nani wale ambao wanaweza kutumia barabara ile kuweza kuelekea maeneo yale. Ni barabara ambayo inaweza kuelekea katika ofisi mbalimbali ikiwemo ni ofisi za immigration katika maeneo yale. Kwa hivyo ni mchakato mzima ambao tutaweza kufuatilia maeneo haya ya Mombasa. Itakumbuka kwamba pia mwendo wa saa 12 asubuhi madereva ambao walikuwa wanaweza kutumia magari kutoka maeneo ya Likoni kuweza kuvuka kuja katikati ya mji wa Mombasa waliweza kusimamishwa katika maeneo yale ya kizuizi cha Likoni kwa ile ati kwamba huenda wakawa wanaweza kubeba wale vijana ambao pale jana waliweza kusimamishwa kutosafiri katika eneo la Nairobi kutokamana basi na kuweza kunakiliwa katika SGR wakati walipokuwa wakiweza kusafiri kutoka Nairobi hadi Mombasa, walipokuwa wakiweza kuimba zile nyimbo za maandamano. Hivyo basi polisi walikuwa na muda mgumu kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba basi endapo vijana hawa wataweza kuwaruhusu kuweza kurudi eneo lile la Nairobi, huenda wakaweza kuzua vurugu zaidi. Ndiposa pale jana wakaweza kusitisha safari zao za mwendo wa saa 8 na hatimaye reli ya saa 4 usiku vile vile iliweza kusambaratishwa huku afisi za SGR ama Kenya Railways wakaweza kusema kwamba ile iliweza kusimamisha vile kutokamana basi na hitilafu ya mitambo. Kwa hivyo ni masuala kadha wa kadha kwamba wataweza kuona ni vipi basi wakazi wa Mombasa endapo Gen Z wataweza kujitokeza kuweza kuandamana siku ya leo ama bado. Lakini kwa sasa hakuna dalili, mji uko shwari, shughuli pale feri zimeweza kurudi kama sawa, magari yanaweza kuruhusiwa kupita. Kwa sasa ni askari tu ambao tunaweza kuona kwamba wameweza kumwagwa kwa wingi wakaweza kushika doria. Ni barabara moja tu kwa sasa ambayo imeweza kuwekwa kizuizi, lakini maeneo mengi ya mji wa Mombasa vile vile pia na kaunti jirani kama vile kaunti ya Kilifi, maeneo ya Mtwapa, mambo ni shwari na kwamba shughuli kama za kawaida zinaweza kuendelea katika jiji hili la Mombasa. Kwako studio.
All right, very well. That was Frederick Kai speaking to us from the coastal region, giving us an update. As you can see on your screens, earlier on or just a short while ago, there seems to be some sort of relative calm in the CBD of Mombasa right there. Cops basically manning different sections, even as Kai has mentioned, the road rather leading to State House or the State Lodge in Mombasa has already been barricaded just for safety purposes, which is basically the same situation across board in Kisumu, Nakuru, and all those other different urban centers and towns that have state lodges. All those areas have already been barricaded in preparation for the same. That was Frederick Kai speaking to us. Maybe as we transition back to the CBD right here, we had our colleague Ian Ketani earlier on speaking to us right from Valley Road, just at the front of Integrity Center. There's basically the same situation. We've seen cops have been flooding different situations or different areas to situate that protesters who might actually make their way to these protected areas do not do so. And what has been consistent across board in these different towns is that the police are trying to sort of restrict the movement within the CBD, owing to the fact that we've had business people complaining that those very same relevant authorities are not taking care of the businesses. And when you look at this in terms of the economic situation in the country, it sets back those different areas in terms of economic growth. Well, we want to just basically continue with our discussion this morning as we progress on. And Remy, yeah.
Yes, indeed. We have, of course, the guests in studio to help analyze this very, let me say, historical day, because it is 35 years, and today marks, of course, a new dawn in the sense that, we have our young people, Gen Zs, who've been very vocal about the issues that they want the government to solve when it comes to education, healthcare, taxes, you name it, excesses of the police and the like. And we've seen seen this morning that there's a lot of course, security presence rather around the CBD and outer parts, of the CBD. So we have our reporters. We've also, gone to Mombasa to show you rather the situation there with our colleague, Fred Kai there, showing you that, of course, it's not business as usual. There's a lot of security right there. But in studio, like I mentioned, we have other guests with us this morning. We have Ian Mutiso, who is an advocate of the High Court. Ian, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Good morning. And we also do have with us Sheila Olang. She's a governance analyst. Sheila, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Right, so we continue with our live coverage of today's events so far. As you're seeing on your screens, that's Westlands right there. Roadblocks, you're seeing police presence. You're seeing, of course, traffic being redirected for that matter. And, as you've seen in many other parts, of the town, the situation basically looks the same. Earlier on, our reporter and colleague Ian Kitani was at Valley Road, where literally we have roadblocks, and it was literally in the same place it was in during the June 25th anniversary protest, for that matter. So a bit of similarities from that time and today, but more so what we see that is, quite constant here is the heavy police presence, throughout the CBD and in some parts outside of the CBD. And our reporters on the ground continue to give you live coverage of what is happening, as we speak, as we're getting it live from location. And this conversation right now, we want to look at digital activism. Right. In the morning, we have analyzed aspects of, what Sabasaba today looks like. But Ian, we've seen you on the ground. You've been representing, victims of, police brutality, victims or young people who have been caught, but they've not gotten the proper procedure of the law. And you've seen the power of social media in this particular sense of how, people can mobilize each other and say, hey, Ian is behind bars, or this is happening. The law is not being meted in the right way. What can we say the role of social media, especially at a time like now, when it comes to the law, adhering to the law, looks like and is supposed to be?
I think as Kenyans, we've gotten to realize how social media is such a very good resource tool in terms of resource mobilizing. It's so good for trying to disseminating information. It's very good as far as expressing one's idea. And in other cases, it's actually helped in securing people's lives. Recently, we saw where one individual in Rongai, who was currently under the process of being arrested, and he was very self-aware on how arrest should look like. Mm-hmm. So it has become a tool such that social media is just a great tool in not only getting to protect one's freedoms and rights, but also...
Sorry to interrupt you, Ian. We'll just come back to you as you continue with that point. But on phone, we do have with us Reverend Timothy Njoya. Now, if you do remember, Reverend Njoya was part of the Second Liberators who basically were part of the movement at that time, the Sabasaba movement at that moment. And he is on phone with us this morning to give us his perspective and tell us exactly, what does this day symbolize for him as one of the original people who were part of the Second Liberators of the nation when it was 7th, of July, 1990. Reverend Joya, if you can hear us, what's your perspective? Reverend Joya, good morning. Good morning, Reverend Joya. Can you hear us?
Hello.
Yes, good morning, sir. Good morning, Reverend. Can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Good morning, Reverend. Can you hear us?
I am okay.
Yes, we're getting you live and clear. Can you hear us on your end?
Hello.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, madam.
Yes, sir. So, right, you are live right now. And my question, you are live right now. Can you hear us?
I'm alive and well.
We're happy to hear, sir. We're happy to hear. Our question to you, as someone who was part of the second liberators, at the time during the Sabasaba back in 1990, what is your perspective of the symbolism of today?
You need to be articulate, please.
Good morning,
Hello?
sir. Can you hear us? Sir, my question to you.
Too many noises there. Hello?
Okay, sir. My question to you is, what do you believe today symbolizes? Okay, right. So we'll be able to get Reverend Joy at another point. We're having an issue with communicating there. So as you were in, you're giving us your perspective.
Yeah, I was just saying how social media has just become a great tool, not only for this young generation, but generally for every other Kenyan, as far as making sure they're able to express their opinions freely. And we're only entering at a space whereby now we are not only mobilizing, but also we are making people aware of their constitutional rights. So it's becoming a very great tool in the day and age of digital activism.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, got you. Sheila, what's your perspective on this thing?
I think digital activism as a whole has been a great driver of change, for political change, for mobilizing, for organizing, asking for economic justice, asking for social justice, and the likes of it. I have to say that, we're often told that activism is something that has always happened in the country. There's a time when, it was Mau Mau, and there's a time when you had Sabasaba, for example, that is now being commemorated today. And the tools and the tactics that were used then made it a bit difficult to be able to mobilize and amass impact very quickly. What the digital space is doing today is it is making that very easy. Number one, it's very easy to inform your vision and your agenda. So back in the day, it used to be you had to have barazas, or you had to have, go to a radio station and someone tunes into the radio station. There was a more, or maybe you printed flyers somewhere, and then these flyers were then passed around to explain what the agenda was. That's not the case anymore. We are seeing that digital platforms are really offering an opportunity for anyone to be able to start an agenda and then have this agenda, lead with it, and have it go through. The other characteristics of digital activism that I think is really cool now is that you don't need to be this icon to start it. It is
Anyone
not
is someone.
necessary.
Someone is everyone.
Someone is everyone. The important person is literally anyone and everyone. That means that it leads to a very organic and grassroots effect, in the sense that in your own corner, in your own village somewhere, in your own small town somewhere, you could see something very simple going on around you. And you have the ability to take that, use the digital platform, rally around it, put information across, and then you effect change. And I think this is one of the characteristics that really demands, from a governance perspective, a systemic approach towards addressing it, because you don't have one person you can please to appease the whole mass, because it's spread across everywhere. So we're living at an age in Kenya where digital activism is finally catching up. And I think it's a good thing, because it takes us away from some of our comfort levels where we had, some economic classes or some political factions or some tribal factions that we used to use as comfort. That's gone anymore. It's not there anymore, because when you're in the digital space, then we don't really care that you're from this tribe or that tribe or whatever. So I think it's such a privilege to be living in this era where you feel so empowered that you can effect change.
Got you. I mean, Alan, if you have a perspective.
Yeah, no, just mine is, before we move away from Sheila, when you're looking at this digital mobilization that you're speaking about, and also just to see what is happening in Migori County, which is a county where you come from, and the general calm that is there. I mean, one would argue that in as much as we are enjoying this digital mobilization and we have this perception that it's widespread, it might not be as widespread, because what are the chances that we have a few people or a number of people in Migori who don't even know what is happening today?
I think that's a good point. And I'm from Migori County, and I typically tell people that it goes both ways. For example, you have a right today to go out and want to be part of the protest and do all those things. You also do have a right just to say, hey, I love the way the country is going. I don't have a problem with it. I don't want to be out there, and I'm satisfied by it. And that's the space where we live in. Speaking of a place like Migori County, what is going on there is what you might not be seeing at national level is there's a lot of grassroots activism in the digital space as well. You'll find that when you go to Facebook, someone will literally say, today I went to this office and this particular, officer was very good and that's really different from the other one. Or they'll start to say, no, my member of parliament or maybe my MCA is doing something that is not correct. And then you're seeing that space is going on. Yeah. So it might not look like what we're used to, but it is still activism. I think what we also have to demystify is activism does not have to be this grand being in Nairobi, going to parliament and doing all this incredible things. Yeah. It doesn't have to be that. It could literally be you just trying to work on your school administration or work in your church, asking your church that we want accountability, we want you to separate, church and politics. Okay. That also counts. Right. And that is going on at a grassroots level. I think what we will see is we will see it slowly simmer up to something that will build at national level, but the agenda remains the same as a generational agenda, which is that we want systemic change.
Well, just to maybe get a further understanding, when you're looking at that situation in Migori, just a few days ago when the Gen Zs and the millennials were out to commemorate that June 25th date, we saw a section of residents from Kisumu, the younger generation, saying we are not part of those demonstrations. We've not been instructed by our leader, Raila Odinga. So maybe just to get a further understanding, is this the same situation in Migori? Is it more about them getting that direction from their known leader, or it's more of like an authentic sort of feeling?
I think it's not very easy to say because the realities are quite different from where we sit today. Yeah. I'll start with Kisumu, for example. In Kisumu, there were sections that came out and said, listen, we don't want to be part of the protest. And I think that's the democratic right as well. If they feel like they're satisfied with everything that is going on and they don't want to be part of it, that's fine. These are places that have been prone to having a lot of protests previously, a lot of protests. Yeah. So in a way, when you see them saying, listen, we've had enough, you guys now you can take it over and go through with it, that's also fine. But in the same Kisumu, there's also a section of youths who felt like we are demanding for this. There was a small section that decided that they wanted to come out and speak up, and that was Kisumu. Migori, on the other hand, is an interesting place. I think the youths within Migori, these are also places that they have typically been at the forefront of protesting, at the forefront long before we started this, Gen Z. And it's always been very politically allied, a lot of the protests that were happening, which is not the same as what we're discussing today, this whole leaderless, partyless movement. And maybe it takes a while just for onboarding to this, that, you think about issues instead of thinking about parties. So I look at that and I see it as it's everybody exercising what they feel that they need to be exercising, and that's fine. It's spaces where it's always been party-led, a lot of it, and now it's not party-led, so it might take a while to transition and go through. But what I can tell you is, even in Migori County, there's absolutely no youth or no Gen Z who is not interested in having systemic change. That is not the case. They might think about it or portray that wish differently, but the sentiments pretty much still remain the same, no matter where you are. So for us in Migori, a lot of it is really grassroots. I keep saying you will see the effect at grassroots level. We saw Homa Bay during Ojwang's funeral. We were just discussing this during Ojwang's funeral, and when you saw what happened during the. I think it was so interesting to see such a change in the tone of the leadership that they were there. In fact, they were sitting there and they were saying, Gen Zs, you did not ban the police station. We know it's not you. And I thought that's an interesting tone, because before the Gen Zs were being accused of doing everything.
Okay, we need to take a short break. We'll be back with the conversation. Stay with us.
The biggest reggae and rhythm show ever.
Nite Majibu Kisao, MK, Top 40 Under 40, Super TV producer and super host for the biggest show in East and Central Africa, the Gen Z Manifesto, every Tuesday from 7:30 to 9 p.m. Tunabonga stories za vijana mazee, maboys majenzi walishia kwa streets, wakahighlight vitu kadhaa, na kwa hii show tunaandika manifesto ya majenzi before 2027. Utakosaje?